This was one that was going great in the regular season until he got hurt, but David Montgomery is listed as a full participant in practice. And
Yeah.
I think the books are a little gun shy on his receiving yards. I'll happily take over 14 and a half receiving yards. Last 7 games that he played, he went for 20 or more receiving yards. And Washington gives up over 23 receiving yards to running backs. Fresh legs, if he's 100% healthy, you better believe they're going to try and get him in open space. So Jahmyr Gibbs has been doing a great job, but you know how much the Lions love David Montgomery. And I think most people picture Montgomery on the goal line or, third and short. He's been dynamite out of the backfield. I expect them to go back to him again. So I was very, very happy to see he was off the injury report. Full participant. I'll take his over receiving yards. The Minnesota Timberwolves will take Jaden McDaniels to have over 4.5 rebounds, gone over in 9 out of 11 games, flown over in 6 out of the last 7 home games. They're home against a Golden State Warriors team that this is their 4th straight road game, and they've been missing a lot of shots. There's going to be a lot of rebounding opportunities, and he's averaging almost 9 rebound chances per game in the last 20. So I really like Jaden McDaniels to go over his rebounds. And then Stephon Castle, a really good draft pick by San Antonio Spurs. He's going to be really good, especially with Wemby. I think that's a duo that's going to be there for quite a few years. But I'm taking his under 1.5 made threes. He's just hit a wall. Under in 13 straight games. He's only averaging 2.8 three-point attempts in the last 10 games, and he's only shooting 22.5% in those games. Whereas a lot of times we see with these rookies, especially in the NBA, they get tired once they get to the middle of the season. This is a long, grueling
Yeah. You hear that all the time.
Yep. Yeah, and so this is a perfect example. This guy's gone under his made threes 13 straight games. Memphis is also the 5th best team defending threes. So Castle, I think they're eventually going to have to lower this to half a three-pointer. So I'll take the under 1.5 tonight. Djokovic dropped a set again, which sets up beautifully for a free play in the next round. Djokovic has struggled against Macek. Take over 36.5 games. Djokovic is not winning in 3. Yeah, he hasn't won in 3 sets in the first 2 rounds. And Macek just had a really long game last night, but he's got plenty of time to rest. These guys are going to be pretty equal. So you can take either 36.5 games over or take it to over 3.5 sets. Just expect Djokovic to not run through this guy. He hasn't looked like his normal dominating self. Alcaraz has changed his serve. It wasn't that great at first, but he steamrolled a guy in an hour and 20. And then keep an eye on Fonseca, up and coming 18-year-old. We bet on him in qualifying. He opened up as a minus 300 favorite in this round, and now he's like minus 600 versus a top 50 player. So the books are out ahead of him, but Fonseca is a good up and coming. And we hit our free play yesterday, so we're looking to continue the roll. 9-2 in the first round, plus 14 units for clients at the Australian Open.
Side 731 Utah +5 +4.5. 797 Kansas +7. 733 Indiana State +8.5 and +9. Total 748 under 150 Pitt, Florida State. 724 under 155 Penn State, Michigan State. I know Ralph likes that one. 712 under Cal, UNC. Real quickly, I picked up a new bot. They just bet sides. UAB -3, Stanford +7.5, Georgia +12.5, Iowa State -5, Georgia +12.5, Oklahoma -2, IU Indianapolis +10, Duquesne +4. It's a new bot. It's there to just pick up rogue off lines. We'll see how it does. Just sharing that information with you. Follow, fade, ignore. I hope you do some damage. Best of luck today, this week, this month, this year. Thanks for having me on, Prez.
Right off the bat, I mean, look, both teams are phenomenal. 12-3 KU, 14-1 Iowa State. Iowa State 8-2 ATS in their last 10. Kansas 7-3 ATS in their last 10. But Ralph, what stands out to me about these two teams is KU is 1-14 to the under. So clearly there's been a lot of value in betting the under in their games. What do we do in this one tonight?
Perez, I actually used Kansas under, so thanks for taking away some of my fire there by sharing that record.
Whoops.
You know, they're off to win against Cincinnati, and that game was 54-40. That's not a halftime score, folks. 54-40 was that score against Cincinnati. Prez, you had mentioned the 1-14 over-under record for Kansas. 13 straight unders. And it's important to know when you're looking at ATS streaks or over-under streaks, if your average margin of cover is a point or two, there is much randomness in there. It's basically flipping a coin. They make the last shot, they don't. Kansas's last 13 games that have all gone under have gone under by 12 points per game. That's a massive number. You look at Iowa State at home. They may be the best team in college basketball right now. I'd had them nowhere near being this good. They're 14-1. Their only loss to Auburn. Auburn's the number one team in the country right now, and that was by 2 points in a neutral setting. This year, Iowa State at home, though, I'm going to look at the total here, Prez. So thank you for giving me that start until my promo. Kansas is 2-7 over under at home. But when you throw out a couple games as a favorite of 36 points or more, they're 0-6 over under at home, and they have failed to cover by 10.7 points per game. Couple other things I like about this Iowa State team. Five players average double digits. What does that mean? Well, when you try to scheme against Ohio State, you can't try to stop one player. You can't try to stop two players. If all five starters are legitimate scorers, that gives you a lot of leeway where you don't need one player to get hot. The player that catches fire that game can lead the team to victory. By the way, Kansas only has two players that average double digits. So they are quite young. They're an experienced team. They're very old, but again, they do have some newness to them with some new players. So I look at this and I say, it's simple for me. I am going to go under the total. I like under first half even a little bit more, and I may actually load this as a client release. I haven't finished my final process of terminating them. And someone I talked to last night said, oh my God, you don't see Kansas as a dog very often. There's incredible value taking the Jayhawks as a dog. Well, let me quantify it. As a conference underdog since 2021, Kansas 3-9 straight up, only 4-7 against the spread. So again, you think there's good value for Kansas being an underdog in the Big 12, a conference they've dominated over the last decade, but it hasn't come to fruition. So when they are a legitimate dog, there's a reason they're a dog. And by the way, when Kansas is a Big 12 dog, their last 11 games, 3 overs, 11 unders. All signs point to the under here again.
Right. Reason is this Penn State team. Look, they won 4 in a row, but you go through their strength of schedule, Drexel, Northwestern, then they hit some real teams, Indiana, Illinois, Oregon. They lose all 3 games. They're plus 11.5 against Michigan State tonight, but 2 of those 3 they kept inside of that number. Man, they almost beat Oregon. They lost by 1 point. They got annihilated by Illinois, and they kept it within 6 against Indiana. This Michigan State team absolutely rolling right now. They've won 9 games in a row. ATS-wise, 8-1 over that time period. And they are blowing teams out along the way. Is 11.5 too short a number here for this Michigan State team?
It's not, because while Michigan State has a regular Izzo type defense, they're number 11 in Ken Palm ratings. Their offense is surprisingly good at number 25, but they still have some young players on their team. You have a freshman point guard. You have a freshman shooting guard. You have a sophomore power forward. And to me, I can't lay this many points with Michigan State because when you see they're a big favorite, they don't extend the lead. They don't look to blow people out. But I also can't get to the Penn State side. Why? You mentioned the Oregon 1-point loss on Sunday. You mentioned the Indiana game where they lost by 6, but that was at home. You look at their true home games, they're fine. When they play in the RAC, they have no problems. Their only road game in that 3-game stretch that they lost was Illinois, and guess what? They lost by 39. When Penn State played at Rutgers, they lost on the road. When they played Clemson, it was a neutral game. So Penn State has 2 wins this season from a top 130 team. One was home against Purdue. One was home against Northwestern. That's enough for me to not back Penn State. But as I said, I don't want to get to the Michigan State side as a double-digit Big Ten favorite. With that said, I'm going to go to another under here as well. Penn State 0-3 ATS on the way. We talked about that. But when they are away from home playing a road or neutral game, they are 0-6 over under. All 6 games have gone under the total. Michigan State at home, 8-0 straight up, 5-3 against the spread, 2-6 over under. But when you look at Michigan State's last 5 games at home, 5 unders, no overs, and they've held those foes to 62.4%. So I'm going to split my best bet here. I'm going to say I like the game under the total, and I'm going to say I like the Penn State team total under the total, figuring Michigan will hold them into the high 50s. Penn State has pressed the tempo a little bit, but you got to remember, when you've only played 2 true home games and you're looking at Ken Palm's tempo ratings, you have to justify, is that a legitimate rating? Or were they very fast-paced at home against very weak defenses, which is 100% different than playing fast tempo on the road against an elite defense, which I don't think they do. So that's where tempos are different when you start this conference season. This is one situation that I expect Penn State in conference tempo to be much closer in the 150s to 180 numbers, middle of the road, when we get into the conference schedule a few more weeks. This was an 8.5 line. You could have bet 8.5 prior to the games being played, and you see it open 9.5, but actually came down to 8. So there are a lot of Irish fans, and why not? With their ATS record, they have only failed to cover 2 games this year. They are one of the best ATS teams to ever make it this far in the playoffs. But when I break down this game, to me, Notre Dame has to play the perfect game to win. Ohio State does not have to play the perfect game. That's immense pressure on Notre Dame and much less pressure on Ohio State. And let me break down some points for that. The Irish have played a weak schedule. It's number 60. It's one of the worst Power 5 schedules there are. But what they've done is had an elite defense. They have an elite pass rush defense. They have an elite pass coverage defense. And therefore, their rush defense has been excellent. Well, why does that correlate? Because no one plays more man-to-man coverage in the FBS or the Power 4 teams than Notre Dame do. They have the number 2 passer rating playing man-to-man. They're without one of their best cornerbacks, but they still have 4 cornerbacks that can cover. Well, when you play man-to-man, that means you have an extra safety, you have an extra linebacker, you do not need to play zone coverage, and therefore your rush defense is extremely good. I don't think the Irish are good enough to play man-to-man against Jeremiah Smith and Abuke and Carnell Tate and a great tight end and 2 very good running backs that both pass catch very well. When I also look at the Irish, they are number 1 in takeaways. They have been awesome on turnovers this season. And in fact, the only 2 games they did not win or tie the turnover battle was their upset loss against Northern Illinois, where they were -2 and lost that game. And they were -1 against Penn State. But when you look at points over turnover, they actually are on the plus side because of that boneheaded interception late in the game, which allowed Notre Dame to kick that field goal in the last second and win that game. When I look at the Irish's takeaways, you can be a good takeaway team because your cornerbacks are ball hawks, or you could be a good takeaway team because you force a lot of fumbles. But fumbles are really a 50-50 prop. When you have to turn the ball over, you can be an elite defense and get a lot of turnovers. But Penn State has had 16 fumble recoveries. When you have that many fumble recoveries, there's a lot of good fortune in your path to be able to get that. Ohio State was only +4 turnovers on the year. They were minus turnovers in 4 games, and they've won it all. So they can make a mistake and still rebound. They were minus turnovers against Penn State on the road. They won the game. They were -1 turnover against Tennessee. It did not fathom. They crushed them in that game. So when I look at the Ohio State offense versus the Irish defense. The numbers may say it's close, but to me, it's Ohio State. Look at Ohio State defense versus the Penn State offense. We know Riley Leonard's going to run the ball a lot. I'm going to have a prop for you about him in just 1 minute. We know they have 2 good running backs. But when Ohio State does not have to blitz, they have 2 NFL defensive ends. They have 3 NFL caliber players on their 4 D lines. They don't blitz very often, yet they had 51 sacks this year. That is number 3 in the country. When you have an Ohio State team that can only rush 4, what does that mean? Well, that means you're allowed to have a linebacker become a spy on Riley Leonard, which is going to have him make some decisions and not nearly run as much as he had. I like Ohio State. I lean with the under. But for best bets, I want to give you 2 props here. Sorry, Andy, if I'm stepping on your toes. But number 1 is Riley Leonard under 35.5 rush yards. Listen, he had a big game last game rushing the ball for 75 or 80 yards. But with that spy, I don't think he gets any big runs. And I think that's a great under. And the other, because the Irish play so much man-to-man and they're going to double Jeremiah Smith for sure. They're going to try to double Ibuka. That's going to leave Carnell Tate wide open. Carnell Tate had a great game last time. Why? Because their last opponent tried to take those 2 wide receivers out of the passing game. Versus Texas and, versus Oregon and Tennessee, those 2 teams played zone. And what happened? Ibuka and Smith had 23 receptions. The 4 games prior to that, where teams were playing more man-to-man, Carnell Tate had 20 receptions over 4 games. This over-under is only 3.5, and it's plus money. You're plus 124. So best bet, Riley Leonard under 35.5 rush yards, and Carnell Tate over 3.5 receptions at plus $120.